Good evening and welcome to the Ravenswood City School District Governing Board meeting of February 29th. We will begin the meeting at 6:33 p.m. and I will start by roll call. Trustee Nunes? Here. Trustee Shibomahi?
I am here.
Trustee Bloom? Here. I myself am present. Trustee Bavera will be out for this meeting. We will move on to item number 2, which is the approval of the agenda. Do we have any questions, comments, or revisions on the agenda? As I see none, I will entertain a motion for item number 2.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Thank you.
I shall second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, say nay. Motion carries 4-0. Next, we will move on to closed session. So before we go into closed session, I'll open the floor to any members of the public that wish to address the board on any matters that will be discussed during closed session. There are none. As I see none, we will go into closed session at 6:34 p.m. Thank you.
29, ¿no? La Latu es la presidenta ahora, ¿no?
Ujú.
Gordita.
A mí me gusta decirles administradoras en lugar de decirles fideicomisarias, ¿no? Administradora la.
Mándame el link.
Ya te la mando.
Without video, ¿eh?
Los 29. ¿Por qué te salió eso?
We will reconvene open session at 7:58 PM. We will go on to item number 5, which is the report of action taken in closed session. For item 3A1, there was discussion and a vote was taken 4-0. For item number 3B1, there was discussion. For item 3C1, there was discussion. Now I will move on to item number 6, which is from the floor. At this time, we will open the floor to any members of the public who wish to address the board on any matters that are not currently agendized. As I see none, we will move on to item number 7, which is the consent agenda. Do we have any questions or comments about the consent agenda? As I see none, I will entertain a motion for item number 7.
I'll entertain a motion to pass item.
Thank you.
I make motions.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye. All opposed, say nay. Motion carries 4-0. Moving on to item number 8, which is the approval to consideration, the consideration to approve resolution SY 24-15 regarding elimination of permanent classified employee services.
Good evening, trustees. As you know, over the last few years, the district has built up about $15 million in reserves. As part of our long-term financial planning next year, we plan to run a $3 million deficit. And to gradually rebalance our budget, we are proposing the reduction of certain classified services, which are listed in the proposed resolution.
Do we have any questions or comments from the board? Do we have any questions or comments from the public? As I see none, I will entertain a motion for item number 8.
I move to approve item 8.
Thank you. Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion carries 4-0.
I have to read the resolution.
Oh, yes.
Ravenswood City School District Resolution Number SY 24-15 regarding reduction certain classified services in the Ravenswood City School District, whereas so and so.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion carries 4-0. Thank you. Now we will move on to item number 9, which is the presentation of early childhood update.
Good evening, trustees. Today we will be presenting an update on our early childhood initiatives. We last spoke about this in June of 2023. So to reground everyone in the district's focus on early childhood education, this has already been an important part of our ongoing strategy and initiatives. We expanded our TK from 3 to 4 classrooms this fall and are working closely with preschool partners to ensure continued school readiness efforts. We have been working closely with other providers to develop the workforce of early childhood educators in our community. And we have agreements with local providers for usage of our facilities to ensure access for our community. All of this is in support of our vision of guaranteeing a quality education for all Ravenswood students. As we spoke about previously, early childhood education will benefit the district and the broader community. It'll ensure our students come into school at Ravenswood better prepared for their education and ensure that we are able to improve our enrollment as well. And of course, early childhood education is important for community good. Based on the board direction from June 2023, we decided as a district that it is important to support our overall early childhood vision and dig into a little bit more of how this might play out in the district. So based on board direction, we have since conducted a poll to understand voter support of a parcel tax. We've conducted a community needs assessment via surveys and focus groups with our community members. And today we'll talk about the proposed approach that we have identified for addressing these community needs. Starting off with the parcel tax polling research. In September, we conducted a poll of over 300 registered voters in the district. There was strong parcel tax support across a variety of demographic groups, including political party and racial and ethnic groups. And this support was relatively inelastic. So at varying tax rates that we tested, there was still strong voter support above 70%. We will share a more detailed report of this research later on in the year, but these are the high-level findings. And all of this suggests that a parcel tax ballot measure yielding an incremental $1 million annually appears to be a viable voter measure. Next, looking at community needs, we collected input from over 250 families in our community through surveys and focus groups to create an early childhood needs assessment report for Ravenswood. The key findings from this report showed that by and large, families are not having their needs sufficiently met right now by existing early childhood options. Parents desire more center-based programs for their infants, toddlers, and preschool-aged children. And affordability was by far the top barrier to finding care. The availability of access to seats is also limited, especially for infants and toddlers, and there's a lot to navigate around wait lists and lottery systems. And finally, program quality and high-quality staff continues to be a priority for families. Based on these community needs, we have identified and proposed a few possible opportunities to help address our community's early childhood needs, all with the collective goal of getting more children into better and higher quality seats. The first proposal is around establishing a universal enrollment system to support families with finding available seats that they meet the requirements for. The next is around funding distribution and using revenues from the parcel tax or other sources to expand access to and improve the quality of programs in our community. We have a few facilities-related opportunities. There is an RFP open right now for potential use of existing facility space, as well as the potential for new construction of a brand new early childhood facility to increase access. And finally, workforce development has been a continued priority for our providers and for our district, and we will continue to invest heavily through grants and other sources to invest in this professional development. Last time we spoke with the board in June, there was a question around how we would staff early childhood initiatives, given our focus as a district, rightfully so, on TK to 8. And so our proposed approach is to create a new nonprofit entity separate from the district that would coordinate early childhood efforts in our community. Again, all in support of our goal of getting more kids into better seats. This nonprofit entity, which would have Ravenswood board participation and control, would be responsible for pursuing the opportunities identified before. The district would provide parcel tax revenues and support with facilities. And as a result, we would be able to enroll more and better prepared students from our community without having to directly staff or manage these initiatives. The providers that we already partner with in the community would be able to benefit from centralized support if they choose to buy in to this organization. And REF and our other philanthropic partners would also be able to contribute funding and support this high impact cause. In order to proceed with this proposed approach, here is a timeline of what the next year could look like. So in the rest of this winter, we will collect and share the data around community early childhood needs and the parcel tax support, the research that we've already conducted in the fall. And we also propose the formation of a parcel tax subcommittee as we get closer towards the election cycle. In the spring, as part of our budgeting and planning for the coming year, we'll have funds set aside for early childhood for discussion at the March board meetings. And we will also review the lease proposals from the facilities and make a determination around how that facility should be used and how the parcel tax funding would be allocated. In the summer, we'll begin the process of incorporating the new entity and partnering with local providers to get that organization up and running. And in the fall, we will enter the election cycle and share the findings from our strategic plan and other early childhood research with the community. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments from the board?
I don't know that it's something that you can answer today, but I'd be interested in information about what percentage of the students that are in the different EC programs are actually attending Ravenswood afterwards. Because if we're potentially investing a lot in it, they need to stay. And I want to know what the current numbers are.
That's a great question. That's something we can definitely look into. I don't have those numbers right now, but we are also working on increasing those numbers. One example is we invited all 5 last year to come visit our kindergarten classrooms, and that was a great way to get more of those students into our schools. So definitely something we will continue to work on.
Do we have any other questions?
Through the chair, thank you for the presentation. I think early childhood education is extremely important to life success. But I do continue, just to be, for transparency's sake, I do continue to grapple with the idea of forming a new entity or moving strategic priorities to a different area, when I think there's so much still we need to do with our TK through 8th students. So just being transparent there. I don't think that's new for anyone. I did have a specific question about, on slide 10, you say this nonprofit entity would have RCSD majority control. How is that? How would you have majority control of the nonprofit? Because you have a board which controls a nonprofit. So yeah, what does that mean explicitly?
An example could be having a majority of board seats on the nonprofit be occupied by, for example, trustees or, Superintendent Sudaria or other members of the district team. Other options would be having distributing voting power of the board to district affiliated individuals as well. So there's a number of ways that we could craft that.
Yeah, I could be wrong, but I think at some point the board becomes under its own control, right? So at some point you might think basically the board has the control. So if anyone in the board or majority of the board decision decides to go in a direction that's out of what you just described, you really then have no control. And so I think that's why I'm bringing it up, because it's not a guaranteed thing in terms of how nonprofit entities work. So just something we might want to talk about in the future.
Yeah.
In future discussions. Yeah.
Thank you.
Were you gonna say something?
That is something we're still exploring and what that will look like, so that we are not taking ownership of the day-to-day, but we do have control of the impact. But
Yeah.
it has not been delineated, and we still need to work through that.
Yes, I know. Yeah, I'm talking about the governance of the board, which if you've got 6 board members and 5 of them vote, no, actually, we want John, who has nothing to do with the district, on the board. John's gonna be on the board. And then if they then bring in Maria, then Maria's gonna be, so at some point you could lose whatever idea of control you might think you have. So that's what I'm saying.
Mhm.
That's what I'm speaking to. So I think we should talk about that.
Thank you.
Any additional questions or comments?
This might be a question for the next meeting, because I think you said set aside funds for seed grant. I think my question goes around how parcel tax revenues and like, how is that pulled into this entity? Like, what does that actually look like? Because
Mhm.
it just says an arrow right now. So like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Actu-
I think this is a good conversation for our March board presentation. Once we have the full picture of understanding what the proposals look like for the use of our facilities, that there's an RFP out for, in addition to, further development of the parcel tax planning, taking all of that information into consideration, we'll be able to make an informed choice about how we want to proceed.
Thank you for your presentation. Agreed with everyone. In regards to the 501c3 status, nonprofit will to very sticky road. I highlighted that in our meeting, and so in the March 28th meeting, I hope to have more examples of what that would look like, the examples of how we would maintain majority control. I think we should also have a conversation with legal to see what the implications are if we do have a majority board on a separate board making calls. I just want to make sure that legality wise, we are in accordance with what the laws are. But I think this is great work. Early childhood development is really important. But we also want to make sure that it makes sense for the time that we're in right
Absolutely. Thank you. We will.
now. That's it for me. As I see no other comments, thank you. We will move on to item number 10, which is a consideration to accept the 22-23 audit report for the Ravenswood City School District.
Good evening, trustees. At the end of every fiscal year, we are legally required to conduct an independent third-party audit. This is our audit for the 22-23 school year. Our auditors are Siobhan and Associates, and they have been longtime auditors of the district. Before I start, I'd just like to take a moment to thank everyone across all departments for their help in pulling together all of the materials necessary for this audit. So at a high level here, we essentially have 3 findings for this year, one of which is a finding that we actually requested from our auditors. The second of which is relating to a law from 1910 that recently was reinstated post-pandemic. And the last one is a finding which the team is currently working on to resolve not only for this year, but also for future years. No worries. Great. So to get to the first audit finding here, this is the one that we've actually worked with our auditors on. Basically, when at the end of every school year, we are allowed to create accruals. That is basically for expenditures that belongs in the prior fiscal school year that essentially the invoice comes in during the next one. Now, the best practice is that at the beginning of the following school year, you reverse all of these accruals. However, sometimes when the accruals are not reversed, they basically can be rolled over from one fiscal year to the next. Now, if you imagine that being stacked on each other for multiple and multiple years, it kind of becomes a snowball effect where in the beginning, it could just be a couple of accruals. And basically by now, we've just amassed a large quantity of accruals. And under the auditor standards, because of the size of this, in order for us to clear these out and basically start our next fiscal year under a clean slate, we have to go through the audit finding process in order to get all of these cleared. So this is our first audit finding, and we do believe that it's actually a boon to the district because it will allow us to basically clear all of these accruals, which for maybe even 5, 10, 15 years haven't been cleared off of our books. The second finding is around the current expense of education. That is technically the legal jargon for this law from 1910. Essentially, it mandates that we either spend 60% of our total expenditures on teacher salaries, or we have every class at every point of the year be below 28 students. Now, given the increased supports that we have provided to our schools, sites, and central office staff, essentially we are not able to hit that 60% of expenditure mark. And also essentially in 22-23, we were over the 28 student limit within roughly 2 classes, I believe, for a combined total of a week. So given that we did not pass this test for this year, or for the 22-23 school year, however, we are currently pursuing the waiver from the county that basically annuls us from any penalties that may be associated with that. The final audit finding is for instructional minutes. Essentially, we are currently short on instructional minutes for the 22-23 school year at the 4th and 5th grades at Castaño and the 4th and 5th grade at Los Robles. We are currently working with RTA to address this, not only for this year, but also for the future years, and are also pursuing any waivers that are available in order to annul any potential penalties as well. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments regarding item number 10? As I see,
I'm just wondering how the instruction, or maybe it's a check-in later, but usually our calendars go out like a year in advance and are approved. And I guess how can we safeguard from this not happening again? At least for sure the instruction.
Yeah, it's not the result of the instructional days, which the board does approve the instructional calendar. This is how the actual day-to-day schedule looks. And so there's clear description here around our additional minimum days, as well as a 15 morning block that was scheduled last year. And so we are going to make some corrections. We made the corrections this year, and we're going to make sure it doesn't happen for 24-25. And we'll make some adjustments.
already, I will entertain a motion for item number 10.
I'll make a motion to approve item number 10.
Thank you.
I'll second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion carries 4-0. We'll move on to item number 11, which is the consideration to accept the 22-23 audit report for Aspire East Palo Alto Charter School.
Good evening again, trustees. So we currently have the fiscal responsibility to oversee our charter schools. Today in front of you is the Aspire Charter, the Aspire Charter Networks audit reports for 22-23. We will be going over KIPS at the next board meeting in March. In reviewing Aspire's audit report from 22-23, they essentially have 2 findings, one of which is for a school within their network that is out of state, so has no relation to East Palo Alto Charter School. And the second one is related to their after-school reporting. East Palo Alto Charter is mentioned as one of the sites that has had some reporting mishaps. However, in talking with them, we believe that they have the correct countermeasures in place in order to fix this from this year forward. That I conclude my presentation.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments from the board? Let's see none. I will entertain a motion for item number 11.
I'll make a motion to accept item number 11.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Motion carries 4-0. Now we will move on to item number 12, which is the middle of the year vital signs presentation.
Right, and I know our team is getting themselves situated, as well as our presentation's already up. So trustees are instructional leaders, including school principals, vice principals, their instructional leadership teams, the assistant superintendent, executive director, and assistant directors, and our data assessment coordinator and myself, the superintendent. We have been analyzing academic data at various levels, including satellite map and street data. Recently, teachers engaged in conferences with families to tailor goals for each student, considering their unique stories, aspirations, and current needs. And collaboratively, our site principals and their instructional leadership teams are devising sustainable systems for student success, factoring in both past and current academic performance while adapting to individual student requirements. And I'll be sharing the executive summary shortly, but this report will cover vital signs purpose, as well as goals and targets, map of where we have been and where we are going, where we are now and what we're going to do to meet goals. So our students' outcomes are the result of a collective effort. And the instructional leaders responsible for this on the ground work
I'm
is
sorry.
the principal
Is there a
team.
conversation happening? Sorry, if you want to have a conversation, please step out in the hallway. Continue, superintendent.
So the instructional leaders responsible for this on the ground work is the principal team. And they are here tonight to engage with the board if there are any questions specific to their site. We have representation from Los Robos Ronald McNair Academy, Alex Cazada, our principal there. Castaño School of the Arts, our principal, Jeremy Packman, and our principal at City Chapman's Ravenswood Middle School, Dr. Christian Miley. And I believe our Bellhaven's team is ill. Yes. So our leadership team accountable to this work and provide consultation and guidance is our teaching and learning team. And so we will have Sarah Stone, our assistant superintendent, Jennifer Grabham, our executive director, Karen Schreiner, our assistant director, and Austin Batson, our data assessment coordinator. And over the last 2 years, our district has implemented vital signs system to monitor students' academic and social emotional well-being. We've seen, and you'll see tonight, some positive outcomes as a result of us being able to diagnose root causes for our student outcomes and taking appropriate action. There are positive outcomes that include improved reading and math growth across grade levels and reduced chronic absenteeism for specific student groups. Progress monitoring guides and interventions such as implementing targeted literacy supports and focusing professional development mindset. And adjustments are made based on data, including the recognition of the need for a more targeted approach to foster a sense of belonging for specific student demographics like our African American boys. And so I will hand it off to our assistant superintendent.
Thank you, Superintendent Sudaria. Good evening, President Latu and trustees. I'm excited for tonight's presentation to share where we are middle of the year towards our end of year goals. And just a reminder of why we're calling this vital signs. We've talked about this now for a year and a half, but the idea is progress monitoring the academic health of our students. We want to make sure, just as you would at the doctor, you're going to check certain things and you're going to do it regularly. And we're doing this regularly 3 times a year. And you'll see in tonight's presentation that we actually have started to put progress monitoring tools in place between these presentations to start to do those checkups even more frequently. And a reminder that we're really focused on this continued 3 broad goals around creating high quality experiences for students so that they are literate, numerate, and that there's a sense of belonging. Our tier 1 vision is that we want our students to receive a well-rounded, engaging education that promotes their academic, social, emotional development. And we've been focusing this year really specifically on high quality tier 1 instruction, as well as creating a universal tier 2 practice so we can support students who might need more acceleration or intervention. We've been focusing on looking at the tasks that are in the classrooms and that they are aligned to standards and that they're also culturally affirming, meaningful, and engaging. And we have been thinking very deeply about how we're centering all of our students in the learning and ensuring that we have multimodal engagement strategies in the teaching practice. And we're using our data to ensure that we are doing what we say we're going to do. As we're teaching, we want to make sure that students have learned. And we see mistakes as an opportunity for more learning. And we talked about this earlier in the year, but our theory of action is that if we focus on certain things this year, really around modeling anti-racist leadership and action, achieving a shared vision for student success, building inclusive, supportive, engaging classroom cultures, and then really focusing on those tiered instructions, centering language development, focusing on some high quality adult learning across the district, focusing on our families, and building some authentic partnerships, which we've actually been able to do. And we'll talk about at the end of the presentation through the Ravenswood Promise work, and have consistent feedback loops that we're actually going to see the growth that we've wanted to see. We're going to start to see us getting closer and closer to those goals. And so here we are in the middle of the year. We're focusing on thinking about who our students are. And tonight you'll see that we are looking at the data through a couple different lenses in terms of demographics. But we are always considering how we're creating those equitable experiences for students. We're using assessments, and as I shared, we started using iReady last year as the way to kind of look at our vital signs. We now have other assessments that we've been able to put in place between iReady. We've started to use DIBELS. We'll talk about that tonight. SIPS mastery assessments. We'll talk about that tonight. We're focusing on why we're seeing what we're seeing. We're looking at things like attendance. We're looking at things like suspensions and office referrals, because we know that if our students are in the classrooms, we are every single day, and they're engaged and they have a sense of belonging, that we're going to be able to make growth academically. It also helps us to do this work. It's helping us to predict. It's not perfect, but it is helpful to predict where we might end up being on the California dashboard at the end of this year. And it is noted, and we want to share, that if we don't meet our criteria on the California dashboard for at least one student group and at least at least two priority areas, we will qualify for what's called differentiated assistance. And so I want to name that we actually have some good news around this. We were in differentiated assistance for one of our LCFF priorities around pupil engagement for our Hispanic, homeless, English learner students, and our socioeconomically disadvantaged students around chronic absenteeism. We have moved out of differentiated assistance for that. And the reason for that is because there was a focus on really thinking about how do we ensure that kids are coming to school. And so we did hard work around that, and we were able to move out of differentiated assistance. Unfortunately, we are now in differentiated assistance for priority area. Sorry, that word is hard for me tonight. 4 around ELA and mathematics, as well as priority 6 around suspension rates for the following student groups: our Pacific Island students, our African-American students, and our students with disabilities. And so what this tells us is that we need to do a very clear focus when we're looking at our progress monitoring tools, when we're looking at our vital signs, not just, for all of our students, but definitely with a real sharp lens on what's happening for these students. So our goals and targets for the year. We've talked about this in different ways in past presentations, but we realized from feedback that we've received from you that you really want to see just like clear, what are we trying to do by the end of the year? So this is what we're trying to do. We want 100% of our students to meet or exceed their typical growth goals on iReady. Now, and Austin will talk to you a little bit more about the stretch growth goal, but we also want 30% or more of our students to meet their stretch growth goal in iReady. DIBELS, which Karen Schreiner will talk to you about, our goal this year is that 55% of the students receiving tiered instruction will be at benchmark in grade level early literacy skills by the end of the year. With SIPs, again, Karen will talk to you about that. We want 90% of our students who place into SIPs to make at least 1 year's worth of growth by May of this year, as measured by the SIPs mastery tests. Reclassification, we want to continue to move students closer to reclassification. It's a little bit harder to create a specific percentage goal around this because there are so many different factors that go into this. And again, we can talk a little bit more about that when we show some data. Chronic absenteeism, we want to decrease by 3 percentage points, which is considered significant based on the California Department of Ed. In terms of a sense of belonging, we want 80% or more of our students to feel safe at school. And these are all based on last year's, the survey, the sense of belonging data is based on the end of last year. So it's a lift up from where that data was at the end of the year. Obviously, we want all of our kids, 100% of our kids. But if we're trying to set some targets and goals from where we were, we want to set the goals, you know, put 10 to 15, 20% above where we were. So that's where our sense of belonging data, our goals come from. So 80% or more of our students having a supportive relationship with an adult at school, and 96% of our students feeling connected. We believe that if we meet all of these goals, we will also be able to make growth in our CASP, which is that we want to move an average of 15 points closer to meeting standard on all of our measures in CASP. So where were we and where are we now? So before 2022-23, the district used CASP as the main measure of looking at data at our students' growth, which is an end of the year lagging indicator. It didn't give us information mid-year. We weren't really able to progress monitor or know what we were doing or how we were doing throughout the year. We were at that point using non-evidence-based literacy practice, balanced literacy, not using the science of reading. And we did not have any district-wide standards-based aligned assessments that we were using regularly. Last year, we made some shifts. We changed things. We added a comprehensive K-8 data system, which included bringing iReady on board. We started to implement consistent coordination of services teams at different school sites. Every single school site has a high-functioning coordination of services team now. We began to calibrate on the instructional core, meaning going into classrooms together, site leaders, coaches, and really looking at what's happening in classrooms and having common understanding and a common mental model of what high-quality practice looks like. We piloted the evidence-based ELA program, which is aligned to the science of reading. And we also piloted some of the TK 8 Tier 2 ELA interventions across schools. We also crafted a comprehensive discipline guide. What we're doing now, this year, we have adopted across K-5 the science of reading, which is very structured and is supporting our students to receive the foundational literacy skills that they need in order to move forward in their literacy. We've implemented we just had one today. We're doing all ILT, all instructional leadership team meetings across the district, and every single school has an ILT that's really meeting and focusing on core practices in the classroom. We have implemented data inquiry cycles in these meetings as well. So all ILTs Collaboration at school sites is centered around looking at data and making decisions based on data. We've started to adopt some progress monitoring tools between the iReady assessments. We've implemented universal tier 2 time, which we've talked about before. And we're currently we've revamped the student survey. So the questions are a little bit more aligned with what we want to find out about in terms of student sense of belonging. And we're currently in the process of revamping our student study team process and doing more deeper dives and data analysis on our absences and discipline. Where we are going, we are continuing to build knowledge around practices connected to the science of reading. This is work that we can't just do in 1 year and be done with it. We're going to continue to do that over time. We're leveraging our collaboration time so that teachers are able to really look at student data to drive instruction. So we're continuing to refine that. We're refining our coaching program to support more content knowledge and ensure that teachers are getting that support job embedded around content. We're building more time out, hopefully, for universal tier 2 time and really focusing in on English language development as another area that we want to make sure we're spending universal time on at every school. We are in the process right now of creating a really clear math vision for how we want to move towards math and have a common practice around how we ensure that we have high quality numeracy skills for students. We're continuing to think about how we're internalizing our standards and our curriculum during our planning time. And we are adopting a systematic approach for classroom school-wide culture. And as I believe Superintendent Sutaria already mentioned in a prior moment tonight, we're really thinking about our instructional time and how we're using that instructional time wisely. And I'm going to pass this over to Austin Batson.
Good evening. We're going to talk a little bit about where we were in data and where we are right now. So this slide is a little bit busy, but it's an overview of the California School Dashboard from last year. So from school year 2022 to 2023. And we're focusing on 5 different indicators here, the ones that are most relevant to an elementary and middle school district: chronic absenteeism, suspension rate, English learner progress, and then our ELA CASP and our ELA math metric. You'll see each of the 4 schools and the district at the bottom, and they're color coded according to the gauge that CDE has built around the dashboard. So red would be the lowest performance, followed by orange, followed by yellow, which is a neutral, followed by green, and then blue, which is the highest. And so I'm not going to get into the details of all of these right here. Across the district, we had 1 yellow, so 1 medium indicator, which Assistant Superintendent Stone alluded to earlier, our chronic absenteeism. Last year, across the district, our chronic absenteeism declined by 8.4 percentage points. No, 8.4%. And so that is a really good result. That exceeds the significant growth metric. For suspension rate and English learner progress, these are both in the orange category, indicating a decline or moving in the less desirable direction. And then for our 2 academic metrics, ELA CASP and ELA math, on average, we declined, we moved further from standard across the district. Okay, kind of pivoting to where we are today. This is just a quick touch point of who our students are, who our families are. Students with disabilities make up around 14% of our student population. Students experiencing homelessness as defined by the federal government, about 45%, 46% of our students are experiencing homelessness. 88% of our students are socioeconomically disadvantaged. And then this last pie chart on the right shows the divisions of our students' multilingualism. EL stands for our English learners, our emerging bilingual students. EO is our students who are classified as just speaking English. RFEP is our students who have been reclassified as fluent in English. And IFEP is our students who have come into the district already being fluent in English and at least one more language. And across the bottom, we see our race and ethnicity breakdown. The majority of our districts are students of Hispanic or Latino students, about 82%. Second biggest second biggest race or ethnicity group are our Pacific Islander students, followed by our Black and African American students. Just a little snapshot of where we are, our students are today. Pivoting into looking at our middle of the year iReady data. It's very exciting. We see some really strong growth, several things to celebrate. This slide is kind of a summary slide. It gives you two big pieces of information. On the left is our student growth, and on the right is the student proficiency. So it shows both how students have grown and where they are. And we'll break these down. The growth looks at our median student. And so in this context, that means our student right in the middle. If we lined up all of our students in the district, from our students who showed the least growth to our students who showed the most growth, that median student for reading has already completed 82% of their typical growth for the year. And the reason we use median in this context as opposed to average is that the growth is unbounded up. So we had multiple students, as you'll see, score 200% growth, some score 300% growth, some score 400% growth. But student can't grow in the negative direction here. And so the median really gives a more accurate picture than the average, which could be subject to those skewed or data points that are skewed more high. So at the middle of the year, sorry about that. At the middle of the year, our goal went all the way back, was to be at least have our median student be at least 50% growth. And we are very far above that. We are, median growth is 82%. So we are exceeding that goal right there. And in terms of looking where our students are, at the beginning of the year, we had 55% of our students who were 3 or more grade levels below. Now at the middle of the year, 44% of our students are 3 or more grade levels below. So 11% of our students have moved from this 3 or more grade levels below into the 2 more grade levels or higher. So we're moving students towards proficiency. That's a little bit of our reading data. And another way, these are really great summary metrics. These are like, if you have only one chance to look, these are the numbers that are most important, but there's a lot more story behind that. And that's what this quadrant graph looks at right here. On the horizontal axis right here, this shows student performance based on a percentile. So 0 percentile would be students who have a lower performance. On the right-hand side, these would be students who are very highly performing. And then the vertical axis is student growth. And we've divided it into 2 sections. One, we're terming low growth, which would be students who did not meet their goal of 50% growth at the middle of the year. And the other as high growth, students who have shown 50% or more growth at the beginning of the year. And so the reason we want to show this is it really helps tell the more full picture of where our students are. We have students who are performing very highly and who are growing very quickly, which is, we would love for all of our students to be in this top right quadrant. And unfortunately, we have about 38% of our students in this bottom left quadrant, which is our quadrant of highest concern. It's our quadrant of students who are not showing high performance right now and who did not grow a lot. So this is just a different way of looking at this data and kind of seeing the full spectrum of where our students are. The last bit that I'll show on reading for right now is a grade breakdown of this year's growth compared to last year's growth. And so for each grade level, we look at second grade, you have 2 bars. This top bar shows our median growth this year, middle of the year. This bottom bar shows our median growth from last year. So looking at second grade, we see that compared to last year, our students have grown more at the middle of the year than they did last year. For all grade levels in reading, we're seeing increased growth this year compared to this point last year, which is really exciting because reading ELA has been a huge focus this year with UT2T and SIPs, and all of those different reading focuses. So it's really exciting to see those results pay off here. Pivoting towards math, we're going to look at the math data in the same way. Looking at our math median, our student in the middle, that is at 65%, which is also exciting. We're beating our middle of the year growth goal of 50%. And then looking at our math proficiency, we also see improvement here. At the beginning of the year, we had 56% of our students being classified as 3 or more levels below grade. And then at our middle of the year, that's gone down to 43%. So similarly in math, we're moving students towards proficiency. We have our quadrant breakdown for math as well. We see that there's slightly more of our students are in this bottom left quadrant, our quadrant of highest concern than for reading. There's 44% of our students in this quadrant. And there's fewer students across the board on the right side of the graph, the high performance side. And looking at the math growth compared to last year, the majority of grade levels have shown some growth compared to last year, but I want to specifically call out 8th grade. Last year, 8th grade showed just a huge increase in middle of the year growth. And this year, they only showed 92%. And I don't want that to be misconstrued as any type of failure or lacking or anything like that. I just want to specifically call that out. Having a median of 92% growth at this point of the year is absolutely something worthy of celebrating. All right, and I will pass it off to Karen.
I'll move the microphone down from you, Austin. Hello, board. I'm Karen Schreiner. I'm the Assistant Director of Teaching and Learning, and I'm excited to share a little bit about our TK kinder and first grade literacy data. Austin did a great job orienting us to 2nd through 8th grade, so we're going to talk about our youngest students now. As our Assistant Superintendent Stone mentioned, this year we adopted a new assessment called DIBBLES, which stands for Dynamic Indicators of Basic Early Literacy Skills throughout TK and first grade. And these are short 1-minute assessments that give us a little bit of insight into how fluent our youngest students are with the most foundational skills that will set them up for success later as readers, such as can they say their letter names? Do they know their letter sounds? Can they sound out words? Can they read high frequency sight words? And so at the beginning of the year, we had 29% of students across our schools in TK1 who were meeting benchmark. From the beginning of the year to now, we have slightly decreased the percentage of students who are proficient in their early literacy skills by about 4%. So let's break this down a little bit by grade. What this slide tells us is that our first grade students stayed pretty much the same from beginning of year to end of year in terms of proficiency level. There were no drastic gains and no drastic decreases. For our kindergarten students, our percent of students who scored well below, so in need of intensive support, increased by 20, I can do math. I wrote it on a sticky note. Here we go, by 17%. And our percent of students who are proficient in kinder decreased as well. In TK, on the other hand, we doubled the percentage of students who are performing above expectations, which is exciting. And one thing to just note is that it's not possible at the beginning of the year in TK to score well below. So what this tells us from beginning of year to end of year is that some of these students maintained they're below, they're needing some support in order to catch up over time. And some students did not make enough progress to maintain that level. They grew at a slightly slower rate. Another new piece of assessment that we put into place this year is little progress monitoring assessments called mastery tests that come from our new Tier 2 foundational skills intervention curriculum called SIPS, which stands for Systematic Instruction in Phonics, Phonological Awareness, and Sight Words. So the data we'll share is from 1st through 8th grade at Belhaven, Castano, and CCRMS. So over those grades and those schools, we took 1,414 mastery tests. Students passed 1,023 of them. So our pass rate is quite strong. At 72% of those little mastery tests were passed. And those are quick little checks that happen every 5 to 10 days to ensure that students are truly mastering the content. Breaking that down by grade, you can see the pass rate varies from 1st through 8th grade. A lot of this data was coming in from teachers up to the very last minute over text message the last few days. So the data that you have in your deck might be different than what was updated today, a couple hours ago. Breaking that down by grade, we also looked at how much growth students have made through SIPS, which is intentionally an accelerated curriculum. So just to orient us a little bit, the blue means that students in just half a year have made accelerated growth. They've made about a year, sometimes more, of growth, which is incredible. The green represents students who are on track. So they've made half a year of growth, as we would expect at the minimum. Yellow represents students who have made growth, but not as much as we'd like them to. They've made less than half a year of growth from the beginning of the year to now. And red represents no growth. And it's slightly misleading, so I'll clarify a bit. It means they didn't fully pass a mastery test. So a mastery test checks, do you know sounds? Can you sound out words? Can you read sight words automatically? If they didn't pass all of those sections, it's not truly mastering the content. And the last thing I want to say about this is that this was a very, I don't know if grassroots is the right way to frame it, but this is the data tracking system was really a groundswell from teachers. It wasn't mandated that teachers collect this data. It wasn't mandated that they enter it centrally. It was a system I shared with a few teachers and teacher leaders who were excited by the possibility of being able to see their kids' data on a weekly basis, and that practice really spread amongst teachers. And so next year, when we launch the school year, we'll have a lot more clarity in terms of expectations around assessment and how the data is gathered. So this is a good pulse check for right now. It's great for the first 6 months of implementation, and next year we're excited to see what takes us further. And I'm going to pass it off to Ms. Grabham.
And I'll lower it even more. Good evening, Superintendent Sedaria, President Latu, and the board. I first want to orient us to all of the information up here. I know it's a busy slide with not a lot of numbers, so I just want to orient everybody. Here across the top is the suspension data from 2023 or 2022, 2023. So last year's dashboard suspension data. So you'll see across the top, this was what was reported to the state at the end of the year. So this next row here, where there's columns of green and then one column of blue, is intended to model our progress as compared to the dashboard, what it would be like if it was pulled at this moment. So there's a lot of good news here. So if we look at Belhaven specifically, at the beginning of the year, there were 0 suspensions. At this point, they've only suspended 1% of their student, and they are tracking well below where they were at last school year. So we're seeing across the board, all of our suspension data decline. So that's wonderful news. That means our kids are at school and learning and are experiencing a safer, more positive environment. I will call out that Little Village Ronald McNair is blue because that's maintained and they are at 0. And we'll see here a significant growth area that I want to point out is at the end of last year, our middle school was at 10.7%. And at this point, they're only at 4%, which is wonderful. In addition to celebrations, there are still areas that we are concerned about and continue to be concerned about. And so I want to zero in on that because I want to say it and to point out that we are aware of this area and that we are continuing to grow and really reflect. At this point, our suspension of African-American students, the beginning of the year, it was at 10%. At this point, it's at 19%. That is 6 out of 31 students. It's below where it was last year, but it's still not acceptable, and we all know that. And so the things that are going on right now are students' focus groups, are asking students, are checking in with our kids in our community and doing that mirror work to reflect on how we can be our best selves to create the safe space for our students. So while I do want to highlight the growth areas, and this is a growth area comparatively, it continues to be an area of concern that we reflect on. One of those ways we reflect on this data is through the sense of belonging, the student survey data. And this is very hot off the presses data. It was completed on the 16th, right before break. Austin, who is amazing, crunched it on Monday to get this data on the board out when Ms. Superintendent Sidaria sent out the board agenda. And we crunched some more site-specific data just today, Austin and I. So when I saw this was very weird to me and very fascinating. So I have a lot of questions. All of it, statistically speaking, it's the same from the beginning of year to now. And it's very unique for all data to remain exactly the same from the beginning of the year to the end of the year. It is great that our data didn't decline, but I have wonderings about why it didn't improve and what that looks like. So moving into some more specific data and how we've broken it down, this is the district level data, not the site specific data. Our site leaders and our instructional leadership teams got their site specific data today so that they can begin doing that deep dive across the board to orient everybody to this graphic. The top here is all students. So 59% of our students are saying that are answering questions that they believe that their schools are culturally aware. 56% of our students believe that the experience is engaging. School climate is 59%, school safety 69. Our highest area is a sense of belonging. And as Assistant Superintendent Stone stated, our goals are 80% across the top there. How you read this disaggregated data here is -18 means our 37 Black African-American students, this is 3rd grade through 8th grade, who completed the survey, are 18 percentage points below the average of 59%. So that's how you read that. So you can see that there are some areas where we have a lot of questions and we have a lot of concerns and we have a lot of worries. So the next step here is then to disaggregate it by school site and disaggregate it by grade level. And we're having a lot of learnings and a lot of some celebrations there as well. So if you're curious, we can share that data with you also. And our hope is to continue to use this in addition to other data sources to support our students. This is very map level data. We also do an assessment called the SRSSIE, which is a very individualized assessment where we look at individual students and how we can support individual students, which drives me into this next slide. And this, I'm going to talk about it a little bit in the context of sense of belonging, but this is how we look at all data within Ravenswood City School District. So what we do is we look at assessment data, whether that is map, satellite, or street data. And we take that data and we look at it in 2 different ways. We look at it as Austin presented, school data trends, and a little bit also as Karen was talking about individual student data. And when we look at school data and trends, that goes into our instructional leadership teams, and they look at how they can support the entirety of the school or the grade level. This data also goes into our coordination of services teams at the individual student level, and the coordination of service teams creates individual plans for individual students who need that support. Then they develop the plan, we implement the database plans, and then we come right back around and assess again, like Superintendent Sidaria or Assistant Superintendent Stone was saying, I'm pointing in the right direction. I'm just not saying the right person. I'm just gonna go, as Sarah was saying, or as Miss Jones, that might be easier for me right now. Now I lost my point. As she was saying earlier, we really need to be on a cyclical cycle and increasing not only beginning of year, middle of year, and end of year, but also looking at those very intricate 6, 4, 8, 10-week cycles to ensure that we are continuously improving.
So we said a lot, and what we wanted to kind of end with right now is where we are adjusting practices based on this data. So we went to the doctor, we got our blood pressure, our temperature, all of those things checked, and now we have to make, the doctor says to us, hey, you have something you need to focus on, and then you do that. So that's what we're doing now. What we saw tonight is that there's some things that we want to continue doing, and there are some things that we want to start doing, and there are some things that we still have questions about. As Ms. Grabham shared, we're curious about some things. So we're going to continue because we've seen that universal tier 2 time seems to be making an impact. We're seeing growth. We're going to continue that. We're going to continue to calibrate around high quality practice in the classroom with our learning walks, with our site leaders and our coaches. And we are in the process of creating what's called a diagnostic decision-making tree, so that back to this slide, we would actually show you a very much more complex slide with a diagnostic decision-making tree, where each assessment point leads us to the next thing that we would do to support students. We are creating a TK progress monitoring goal and expectations plan currently, and we're really focusing and investing in early literacy. We want to make sure that we're getting our kids early so that we don't have to do as much intervention later on. We need to clarify the system that we're using to monitor SIPs. As Karen mentioned, we want to make sure we're starting at the beginning of the year. It's exciting that teachers kind of created the system around progress monitoring SIPs. It would be nice to have a district-wide system that we can really use regularly and make sure that it's updated. We are going to be creating guidance on the decision-making process for adjustments in terms of how we're grouping students based on data, because we don't want groups to be stagnant. They should always be flexible and always moving as students grow. We're going to continue to progress monitor the indicators for reclassification so that we're able to reclassify our students when they are ready to reclassify. We want to make sure we're going to be doing another celebration at some point this year for all of our other students this year who are able to reclassify. Our goal is to reclassify as many students as we possibly can, because we want them to go to high school having all of the opportunity that they should have for the high quality classes in school. We're going to focus on shifting our 24 and through 2024-25 instructional schedule to make sure that we have more time for English language development, so that we're making sure that we're creating more opportunities for multilingualism. We're going to continue to host this really cool, innovative SARB fair that Jen Grabham has started this year, that instead of having a punitive approach to student chronic absenteeism, we actually have a positive and supportive and restorative process. We're going to continue to create a sense of belonging through some of the enrichments and clubs that have been really successful. In fact, yesterday at the middle school, we had an incredible experience, a block party. We had the arts night at Castania last night, and I know there's other events that are happening, but those enrichments and experiences really do help support that sense of belonging for our students. And we're going to start to implement a targeted universalistic approach to really ensuring that we are paying close attention to our African American Pacific Island students and our students with disabilities. And what that means is we're not doing it after. It's not a punitive approach. It's a tier 1 experience that's in place for all of the students, but we're targeting and focusing on these particular students so that we're shifting the narrative, the internal narrative and the external narrative about our students. And so you'll hear more about that in the future. It's called the Changemaker program. I'll be talking to you about it. And we know that if we implement these things, well, we hope. No, I'm going to say we know. We know that if we implement these things, we are going to start to see that growth on CASP that we so desperately want to see for our students. And with that, I'm going to pass back to Superintendent Sidaria for our last slide.
Right, so the team here pretty much shared our theory of action, and the ultimate goal is for us to have our students match this learner profile and be able to exit with an experience in Ravenswood City School District that really has us have us ensure that we've met our commitment for our students to succeed. And our learner profile here, which we have shared with the board, we've shared with outside community members, our vision team, our all instructional leadership team across our schools to provide feedback. This is a draft. It serves as our North Star to really develop our strategic plan around how to ensure this becomes true. And we're excited about the work that we've done around this. It's going to serve as a common language. It's going to serve as I statements that our students should be able to articulate. It's to help us ensure also that we allocate our resources and we bring the people, that are recruited to join our team to be committed to this Ravenswood promise. And it actually also helps us realign the commitment of our folks who are currently with us to ensure that everyone's on the same page. And so this is our ultimate goal, is our profile.
Thank you.
Do we have any questions? We have questions and comments from the board.
I have a-
To kick us off?
I have a lot, so please feel free to intercept or. Okay, and I kind of try to take it to the slide. So if we go back to slide 20, where 92% of the growth wasn't so great. I'm wondering if more can be said about the 5th grade math. Because while the other ones look good, I'm wondering if there's a story to tell there.
That's a great question.
That's a good question.
That's the handoff, not the results.
Yeah, I think for what I want to say about the math in general is that the story is that we need to adopt a new math program. And as I said, one of the goals that we have is to create a math vision. We actually are starting a math lead team actually next week or the week after, where we have representative from each school who's going to be coming and really thinking about math in our district and really thinking about what is the program that we really want to have around math so that we are not seeing these results consistently in the future. Next year, we're going to be piloting new math curriculum and really the focus that we've had, this intense focus that we've had around literacy this year and we'll continue to have next year. We're going to shift and do that same intense focus, not next year, but the year after, once we've adopted the new curriculum. But next year is the year to start developing that mental model of what high quality math instruction will look like across the district. So while I can't speak exactly to why the 5th grade looks that way, I do want to say in general, none of this math data makes me super happy. So we
I
want to
agree.
make sure that we're growing.
And with that, not to tread light, I would just suggest to tread lightly with the new pilot because we just got a new math framework and I don't think publishers are quite ready. I think they're just hodgepodging new curriculum to try to fit the framework. And so I don't know how, just keep that in mind as we're moving forward because that
Yeah.
framework's going to change everything.
Absolutely. And that's part of the reason why we're not rushing to do a new, anything next year. We want to build up our knowledge more.
And I guess to that note, on the last slide where you talked about next steps, I see a lot of literacy, and early numeracy is super important. So we can't just focus on one, we have to do both together. Sorry, and then in slide 22. I guess from what I understood. In TK, for the beginning of the year, you can't measure the well below. But in kindergarten, you can. And so are we slowing down the learning in kindergarten or what's, I guess I didn't understand like why we see an increase there.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And we're definitely taking steps to address the greater need there. Principals are reallocating resources and personnel to be able to provide more targeted small group instruction. Just this past week, I was at a school delivering 2 professional development series to folks to continue to support around the literacy instruction there. So we're hoping that by pivoting really responsively to this data for this particular grade level, we're gonna be able to meet kids where they are and catch them up over time so that at the end of the year, they're as ready as possible for first grade.
Yeah, and I also want to say that, again, this is where we are. This is our data. And so what we know we need to do is really have an intensive focus on early literacy. And that is the goal for next year, is to really go all in on not just all the things that we put in place, but really focus in on early literacy so that we're building up the skills of our teachers around early literacy practices really intentionally.
I think that response gets me to my next question. With iReady data, my understanding is that each teacher can see their progress for their class.
Mhm.
And so is there a plan for teachers who aren't meeting it? Because I've heard that some teachers get 200 growth, but some teachers don't. And so is there a plan? Is there coaching in place? Are they going to put up some improvement plan for that teacher? Like what's happening to the teachers who aren't making the growth of their students?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I think that that's something, there's a lot of different ways to approach that. One is definitely coaching and support. I think the other is looking at just overall going back to some of the things I talked about before in terms of planning and really understanding the standards and the practices and getting really clear on that. That means sometimes we might need to do better professional development support for groups of teachers. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that the fact that we now have that data, we can make more intentional decisions about how we do the support for teachers and where the coaching should be.
Just to piggyback, just to piggyback off of that, this slide was also the slide that I had a question on because these are children who are starting in our district.
Yes.
In the middle of the year, this is what the data looks like.
Yes.
So I will say that I want to push back with your 2 options and I want to know what is the plan. We have the data for every teacher. There are some teachers who have 200 points growth and we have some teachers who have negative, or I don't know if there's negative, but right, there is not growth happening. So the active question is, what is the plan? What is the coaching? Are those teachers that have 200 going to be partnered with teachers who don't, right? And what is the accountability? So I think that it's great to have 2 ideas, but I want to know what is the plan and what is the accountability. And I think that that is especially because this is foundational and this is what leads to all of the other slides that we are seeing. So if we don't fix this problem right now in the middle of this year, this is going to be the same problem next year, in the beginning of the year, in the middle of the year, at the end of the year. So I want to know those 2 things. What is the plan? And then what is the accountability?
So based on this data, we did this week go into a school and do a targeted professional development for teachers based on this data specifically. So that's the plan. The plan is we know where we are, we know what we need to do, and now we have the supports to put in place to move the needle. So really, truly, it's not like, oh, we might do this. We literally this week did this because of that data. So that is the plan. And I want to say too, that the other piece of this is that our principals and our site leaders are developing their capacity to have really hard conversations and focusing in on when they see things like this, naming it and doing something about it.
Okay, I have a question. Oh, sorry.
No, you go.
So my follow-up question to that is, okay, you went in and did professional develop this week. What are you gonna continue to do from now until your next presentation or unless we request for you to come back in a month or two, so that we're continuing to make progress. Because I think what I'm hearing a lot is we are going to put in more efforts, we are going to do one or two off the bat, but I think that for us to develop and continue to move forward, there needs to be action items so that when you come back and you're, saying some of the plans that you intend to do, I want to know what did you actually do? So if we go down a slide 29. Where it says continue to create a sense, this is an example of belonging through enrichment in clubs. What does that enrichment in clubs look like? Like, what are we currently doing with the enrichment in clubs? We see the current line that we're at now. What are we going to do to enhance these things to get the implement or or whatever action item we're trying to do? So what I'm trying to say is I want to know specific examples.
Okay. I mean, I think that would be a good thing for principals to share because each school has different things that they're doing. I don't know if one of the principals wants to pop up and talk specifically. Maybe Dr. Miley, you can talk a little bit about the enrichment and clubs that are happening at your school site specifically. I do want to say though that the slide that we just talked about in terms of what are we going to do, what we're going to do is we're going to continue to look at the progress monitoring data within the next month. And when we see that there's something that's going on, we have the support that's put in place right away. i.e., we go to the school, we make sure we're sitting down with the teachers, we're making sure they're understanding the curriculum, the standards, we're making sure they're using the assessments, and we're making sure they're shifting practice.
I'm going to interject here too before Dr. Miley speaks a little more specifically about the clubs, because I think that is a highlight of the middle school that speaks to specifics. But our site leaders are going to need to take full responsibility of the academic results and have specific actions to address them, is what I'm hearing from the trustees.
Yes, I think that goes back to the accountability piece of we're not going to get this data again until the end of the year, right? We don't have a mid year.
We can.
We can. I don't know if you guys want us to, but we can. I think that each of us are going to individually ask for it. I will be asking for it. I know that.
Right there behind you.
I think every single person up here is going to be asking for it. So I think that is the problem, is that at the end of the year now, we would have to wait through the summer, the beginning of the year, then we have the summer, and then that's the problem. And then, so we have a great opportunity right now for the accountability. And I think that it needs to be an action plan. I think that teachers need to be held accountable, and I get like the PD and all that, but I also think there needs to be some push into the classroom to be like, what is happening? And here are ways that you can change your practice right now to be responsive to what's happening in the classroom. And so that is on site leaders, I know, coaches, and ultimately the assistant superintendent of teaching and learning, and then ultimately the superintendent, right? So what is the plan to push into those classrooms where, like, I'm just really struggling with the kinder and first grade slide, right? Because we're telling people if you come here, you will be prepared. And this slide is showing us that they are not. So the majority is not. I'm not saying they all are. The majority.
Exactly, because there are results from classrooms where there are consistent progress. And I do want to indicate that we do have walkthroughs, and the site administrators, along with their coaches, with the assistant ed services assistant director, we are in the classrooms looking at trends, identifying areas of growth. And the goal, though, is for principals then to take that back and talk with their ILT about next steps. And I hear the cycle has to be tight with clear deliverables.
Yes.
And through the chair, I'm just wondering more about the supports. And so cool to get professional development, but if they're not getting time or support to then take that professional development and put it into their practice, if they're not like co-planning with other teachers, if they're not visiting like excelling classrooms, like doing instructional rounds to see what classes are looking good, and they still have no idea, they're going to fall back to what they're used to.
Absolutely.
And so the support needs to be there. And it
Yeah,
has to be
absolutely.
different types of support, because I can sit through another meeting and not do anything. I could be grading and doing whatever.
Mm.
And that's not gonna help me. And so it needs to be specific and time bound, all that SMART goals for these teachers so that it happens and they feel supported. Because I also don't want to say like, oh, the teachers aren't doing their jobs.
Right.
Because I know they are, they're showing up. But also like if they're not meeting it, how can we support them to do so?
Yeah.
I think also in reference to the board, we asked for more during the first presentation. I think that's a fair enough comment that I can say that we asked for a fair amount. And this mid-year is good. It had a lot of slides, it presented a lot of data. But I think what was lacking was the XYZ of how we're going to improve. And I mean specifics of like, this is what, like, for an example, if a classroom isn't excelling, we're gonna go in there 5 times, we're gonna offer this type of development, we're gonna offer these types of courses. If they meet this criteria, then they will be on this path. If they don't, this is our action item of how we're going to combat that. And if we're still there, what are we gonna do here? Because I feel like when it comes back to the data, we always end up on this left side. And we're saying, we're gonna try to do this, but you give us a bit of a like broad thing of what it is without a concrete thing. Because our families are coming back and they're gonna ask us for accountability. Our community demands accountability. When we continue to miss it by this much, I feel like that's why we're kind of in this position now. There was an example from a principal. Talk about it.
Good evening, everyone. So based on what you were just saying, at the beginning of the year, we looked at that beginning of the year data specific to sense of belonging and those 2 specific communities around our African-American students and Pacific Islander students. And based on that, we created a Black Student Union and we have an Asian American Pacific Islander Club. And those 2 specific clubs have been very important in developing cultural activities that we put into place this year that our students have really responded well to, that we've seen our sense of belonging data grow based on. But also, just going back to yesterday's block party, this entire month for Black History Month, our Black Student Union led the entire charge of what the month was going to look like, what activities we were going to do, all the way down to what kind of music I put in the playlist. Everything so that they very much felt like we are so connected. Then on top of that, knowing that our data is still not where we want it to be, we are just about to begin a partnership with an Namatangi. And they're going to be coming and working with our students that are in our AAPI and BSU after school together on mindfulness activities, as well as some technology detox stuff, but stuff to support them and continue to build them up. So we are being directly reactive, as you just said, like, give me some specific things that we're doing. We are doing some specific things with those groups, and we want to continue now increase that and build that out so that our students continue to feel culturally affirmed and feel that sense of belonging and also feel that sense of ownership. Like, this is my school and this is why I know it's my school.
Through the chair, would you mind doubling down a bit to talk a little bit more specifically about the interventions you're using prior to suspension for students?
So we a few months back, we came up with a very good in-school suspension process for things that we knew that we could handle in-house as opposed to having to displace a child from school, because we all know that displacing a child from school and sending them home is not going to correct behavior. There unfortunately are a handful of things that could create a situation where an administrator has to take that action, but there are so many things that we don't have to do that for. So that allows us to keep students in-house, use our ripple effects, social emotional growth programs with them, and our reflection programs and restorative justice programs with them to correct and work on the behaviors, and at the same time still involve the families in that work with us. And that's really helped reduce that suspension rate.
And would you say the increase of 5.3% in suspension rates is due to have to situations?
Unfortunately, the suspensions that we see are only for those situations where we have to take a significant action based on the action that took place at the school.
And who determines the have to? Is that ed code?
That, yes, that is ed code as well as a system that the district has developed internally in partnership, and Ms. Crappen can speak to it in even greater detail in terms of the template that we use and the connection that I make with her or one of my superiors in the event that I'm not connecting with her before any of those ever occur.
Is the standard of in-house suspensions the same from CCRMS to all the other schools within our district?
I don't know the answer to that.
It varies because of the age level and the circumstances and the fact that they have multiple classes at the middle school versus a single class at the elementary school. So it looks a little bit different. There are only a handful of things that you have to suspend for. Before we suspend a student, we consider, is this the thing that we have to do to either help the circumstance that the student was involved in, and the student needs kind of some time away to be able to re-engage. But I think the most important thing that we do around suspension is, well, the second most important thing we do is around re-engagement. When the student comes back from a suspension, they have a meeting, there's a series of questions they ask. The site leaders ask the students, ask the family, how can we help you? Why did this happen? Is there anything that we could have done to prevent whatever happened from happening in the future so that there's not another suspension? So I said that's the second most important. The first most important thing is the social emotional learning curriculum. We use Second Step. The middle school does it on Wednesdays, if I'm not mistaken. And the other schools do it every single morning, a little bit different per site. Each school has their own culture of how they address social emotional learning. I know that Bellhaven primarily focuses on like a morning meeting and a climate and culture, and you explicitly teach when you're in a conflict, how do you handle the conflict? The other thing we've really focused on this year is a lot of trainings around the functions of behavior, because behavior is communication. Like if a kid is exhibiting a behavior, they're trying to say something. And so really understanding why those behaviors are occurring, what's the antecedent before the behavior, and how we can help before that behavior occurs. And so we've done trainings with our special education staff, our campus supervisors, our yard duty. Time is hard for us to get to our teachers, but we slip it in where we can. But we're really trying to study and learn around the functions of behaviors and what causes those behaviors to happen, and teach an alternate way to express yourself, because they always come from, I was angry, I was frustrated, I couldn't stand, or I didn't have a voice, like I couldn't speak for myself. And so really the social emotional learning, understanding functions, and then after a behavior, a suspension occurs or something like that, a re-engagement meeting, and then a referral to the coordination of services team. And that coordination of services team then picks that up and creates an individualized plan for that student to provide support. That plan may be very like a one-time situation, or maybe a long-term plan, or a referral to counseling. Or a lot of our schools have a check-in, check-out system where they have an adult that checks in with them at the beginning of the day, sets goals, and then checks out with them at the end of the day. So hopefully that gives a more broad and specific around, I don't know if that answered your question or not. Or
Yeah, I think that was a good response, Ms. Graham. Yeah, I just it feels like I've been on the board 6 years now, and every year it just feels like this doesn't change.
Yeah.
And so particularly for these, again, communities of students, and it's I don't understand why it's not changing. And it feels like, again, consistently, these communities of students are also the ones performing lower than others in our district as well. They're the ones who also then feel less engaged, who feel less belonging, less welcomed. And so I want us to be active, proactive, preemptively solving things before they happen so that we can get out of the cycle.
yeah,
So this data can change. And so, they're all connected,
totally.
right? We know learning's connected to all these things. It's ecological. And if we can't have people feel welcome, loved as students, they're not going to perform, right?
Yep.
And then it's going to lead to other behaviors and things like that. So like, I think you gave a good response. I just don't know if what we're doing is good enough. Or
Yeah.
If it just keeps happening.
No, I totally agree with you. And not
And I'm not
only
blaming
like,
anyone.
oh,
person.
no, but yeah, no, it's okay. Like, I feel the same passion as you do about it. Like I mean, I put a box around it. I'm like, not okay. And we have to do better. Every single one of us, not one single individual. Everybody has to do better.
Mhm.
I think I really want to push the learner profile, because if a teacher is, or an educator, classified team member, a site administrator, folks in the home office, if we're not able, if a child is not able to say, I trust my adult, I trust the adult and classmates to help me grow, and they trust me to help them. I mean, that's a serious issue. And that is our ultimate goal, is as a teacher, as a classified team member, as a superintendent, our students need to be able to feel that from the adults. And I really want to ensure that the commitment and the expectation I have is for every team member to ensure these I statements become true for students. We can get specific and get down to the teacher or the adult who is having the issues with the behaviors that they are seeing in classroom that maybe are manifesting because of what is happening in their classroom. We can get very specific down to the grade level in the classroom in regards to academic progress. We also want to be respectful, mindful of impact, knowing that student outcomes are very serious and we are all responsible for the student outcomes. But we, instead of giving names or a specific grade level at a school, which can narrow down who the individuals are, we can give case studies and give specifics, like you were saying, Trustee Latu, about here's an X classroom, here are the scores, and here are how we have intervened to ensure that there is progress and change without identifying individuals. Because I feel like there's a need for that kind of specificity.
Yes, I agree. And I think we all would agree. And I'm less interested in knowing what classroom.
Not the classroom, but the
Exactly.
action
Don't want
and
to
the
know that.
next step.
It's the action,
Exactly.
the consistent cycle of action, not reaction. Yeah, proaction? We can
Yeah.
work on that.
But the
Well, one
data
thing
is allowing us to realize, here's some information in front of me. This is how I'm gonna move forward, and how I move forward, did it make an impact? So I need to look at the data to help me shift.
For sure.
And yes, I know you don't want specificity in terms of the exact who and what, I mean, the who, but you want to know the how and the what.
If I could just interject too, one thing that I mentioned is that I'm going to be doing a presentation very specifically connected to this targeted universalism approach, that we are in the process of putting together training. We have identified student culture coordinators at 3 of our 4 schools that are going to be, that are already, we've already gone to observe in Oakland Unified School District at their African American Male Achievement Program. We are currently looking at different curricula, and they're going to Kingmakers of Oakland training in a few weeks. So we are going to your point, Trustee,
That's all you tried.
I tried, and I was like, I'm gonna botch it, so I'm just gonna be like Trustee. But we are going to create from the ground up the way, not to do it after the fact, but before, because what we want to make sure of is all the things that you mentioned are in place. We want our students to come, specifically our Black students, which is where we're seeing very high need, as well as your Pacific Island students. And that's why we're in differentiated assistance and our students with disabilities. But we want to make sure that we have that approach, that we're shifting the narrative, that we're coming from a tier 1 practice as opposed to, oh, now they're in trouble and they've been suspended. That's too late. It's at the beginning. And if I could just jump on to the idea of a case study, I think when I hear you want specific, what the thing is, I do have to say, there are different things you do for different things, and we would spend probably about 20 hours talking about when this happens, when this happens, this happens. But I love the idea of a case study, because then what we could do is we could take from a data point, what is the whole thing that we do from the data point on to shift what's happening in that classroom. And I just want to name that when I said we did PD this week, I don't mean that we went and sat and talked at people. Karen went in and sat with teachers directly and showed them how to use the curriculum directly, had them practice it so that the next day they were able to improve their practice. And they looked at their data together. So that's the kind of level that we're talking about. And we're lucky because we have a person like Karen. We also are training our coaches to do that same kind of level of work. So happy to share more and more specifics, but I just want to name that there's an art to these moments, and every single thing is slightly different. There's different reasons why we might be getting what we're getting in terms of data. So that's why we have to really unpack and do a diagnosis. So I love the idea of a case study though, and I'd be happy to come and present a case study as well.
Through the chair, and I know you were about to say something, but I just didn't want to move on without just expressing my gratitude, number one. So, and number two, for, asking for forgiveness. If anything I say up here ever sounds accusatory, because it's not that at all. I have the deepest gratitude and respect for everybody in this room. So know that. I'm always still going to ask the questions because that's what I'm here to do for 2 more years. But just know that I'm very grateful and thankful for the work that you do. Trustee Nunez.
I think you made me think of, so I had 2 things. One, I don't think you can answer today, but I'd be interested in seeing data on the suspension rates and when and if the students are being suspended multiple times. Because that's because if they are, then that speaks more to the work that we need to do, because one, they shouldn't be suspended at all, hopefully in the perfect world, but we know it happens. But if they're getting multiple times, then we're missing something. And so I'd want more data on that. And then 2, in terms of the coaches, like it's great that we have Karen at sites doing literacy, but what are we doing with numeracy? And I remember asking about that for a site and said that someone told me that, well, we didn't find anybody. And so I'm interested in what are our vacancies at each site, because that's also going to be affecting the scores up there. And so I want to see that. And I want to see us get a little bit more creative. Like if we have a fully staffed coaches at a site, why can't we share coaches across sites? Because everyone needs to work, and I think we need to move to be more creative in using the resources that we do have and the people that we do have.
Thank you. Aside from that, this is a totally left field comment. But just going forward, it's important to remember that when an agenda is approved and it's posted online, that it's reflective of the same thing that's presented. Because what the public is notified on is the agenda that's on. So whatever is online needs to be the same thing that's presented here. And it's the first time I'm catching it this year. But going forward, if there's updates, you got to present it the next time, because whatever is on the published agenda is what needs to be presented.
Or we can update, I believe we can update it to the board though, but we also need to update it online.
And yeah, I'm online and it's not the same. But going forward, just remember these things. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Next up, we have the superintendent's report.
I believe we had a comprehensive report with our data. So I just want to highlight 2 things. Again, the opportunity to provide feedback to our learner profile, please. And then also we are hiring. So I shared some information with our management team along with trustees to promote our vacancies and some incentives that we have for hard to fill positions. Would love for you to pass on the word.
Awesome. Moving on to board reports and communication. I just have one, and that is a community leader recently passed away, David Chang. So we want to spend this second just to honor him and his commitment to East Palo Alto. Thank you. And
Pastor at St. Francis?
Pastor Goody?
No. There was a pastor at St. Francis. I don't know his name, but yeah. Oh, through the chair, board report. I usually don't do this because at this point it's usually like, let's go. But I did just want to shout out President Stevenson, Shawnee Stevenson at the Sequoia Union School District Board. I was just at an event earlier with her at Menlo Atherton High School. It was a lovely event in honor of Black History Month. Beautiful celebration, big crowd, lots of community members were there from here, East Palo Alto, our home. It was just really nice to be there with her and see so many folks there celebrating. So good work, EMA today, and keep it up.
So next up, we have California School Boards Association 2024 Delegate Assembly Election Vote. I have a question for this vote. Can you abstain? So all those who wish to vote can pass, they can just pass their votes to you, right?
Okay, I think that you still need to write abstain on the paper so we can tell.
You can book up to 3. You don't need to vote for everybody.
No. Okay, so for mine,
So we have one vote for Chelsea Bonini, 0 votes for Sophia Lane, and 0 votes for
thank you. So we have 1 vote. Moving on to the consideration to approve resolution, board member excused absences. I will entertain a motion for item 16.
I'll make a motion that we pass item 16. Yeah.
A second.
Resolution number SY 24-11, board members excused absences, whereas education code authorizes each member of the governing board to be absent for various reasons, so on and so.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Motion carries 4-0. The next regular board meeting will be held on March 14, 2024 at 6:30 p.m. Open session will hopefully begin at 7:15. I will adjourn the Ravenswood City School District Governing Board meeting on February 29th at 9:46 p.m. Thank you.